This is the year we're celebrating the University of Akron's sesquicentennial, 150 years since its founding. But the first students didn't start to arrive until 1872. Some may have walked, some came by horseback or horse-drawn wagon, and many came by train from all over rural Ohio. How does a university establish the continuity that lasts 150 years? Traditions. And how do we establish traditions? Well, we might say that traditions are like a rock on which legacies are built, and you can even visit the rock at the University of Akron. The Buchtel College class of 1880 had 9 graduates. They found a giant Ice Age boulder on a farm 5 miles away, owned by Colonel Simon Perkins, the son of Akron's founder. The class raised $75 to pay for the rental of the wagon and team, about $2,000 in today's money, and they had it hauled to the Hilltop campus. The rock is made of syenite granite. Like an iceberg, 2/3 of the rock is actually below ground. It is 7 feet high, 5 feet wide, and 3.5 feet thick, and it weighs 8 tons. The rock was relocated to its present site in 1961. In 1905, the freshman class painted the rock, much to the dismay of the classes of 1906, 1907, and 1908, who thought that the freshmen had desecrated their rock. But paint it they have, almost every year since. And in 2014, the university began to remove those 6 generations of paint from the rock. Student life at Buchtel College in the 1870s could be a little grim. The rules for behavior were strict, governed by the Universalist Church. When classes began in 1872, smoking of tobacco was not only prohibited, but was considered sinful. In the Roaring '20s, students championed an effort to have the smoking ban lifted, which did happen in 1934. In 1977, a state law prohibited smoking in classrooms and laboratories. And in 2003, the university's Board of Trustees banned smoking altogether. The legendary founding father of the college, John R. Buchtel, frowned on the drinking of alcohol. But beer has always been part of any college life anywhere, as young men and women experimented with the delights of the devil's brew. Alcohol was banned on campus for 100 years. But in 1969, a vigorous campaign by Student Council led to the sale of 3-2 beer in the Student Center. Aside from smoking and drinking, no issue was more important to the men and women on the campus than the women and the men on the campus. From the opening of the school, both sexes occupied rooms at Old Buchtel. There were rules that kept men and women apart as much as possible. But 18-year-old students would do everything they could to subvert regulations imposed on them. Since students of the opposite sex were not permitted to mingle casually at school, couples carried picnics on walks in the local parks and pastures that surrounded the university. Typical of the Gilded Age, there were bonfires and parades, socials presided over by faculty, ice skating, taffy pulls, sleigh rides, and boating in the Cuyahoga River. Collegiate hijinks, playing pranks on gray-bearded administrators, were the product of students with enormous energy and willfulness. In the early days, that meant leading a cow to the upper floors of Old Buchtel. Another college ritual was the well-planned mistreatment of new students by upperclassmen. It included this beanie, worn by Norma Jean Abel, class of 1947. Wearing the beanie was mandatory. It was part of the ritual of hazing. Hazing was officially banned at Buchtel College in the 1890s, but it continued clandestinely for 100 years. Fraternities became a part of student life from the beginning. The first fraternity, Delta Tau Delta, was established in 1873, followed by Phi Delta Theta in 1875. Lone Star Fraternity, founded in Akron in 1882, may be the oldest surviving local fraternity in the nation outside of New England. The first sorority to appear on the campus was Kappa Kappa Gamma in 1877, followed by Delta Gamma in 1879. The university's first African-American sorority began in 1932, was dissolved, and then reorganized in 1961 as Alpha Kappa Alpha. In 1890, tragedy struck the women of Kappa Kappa Gamma. As they met in a clubroom of Old Buchtel wearing fancy costumes, a paper hat encountered a flame from the gas lighting system. Fire erupted, killing 3 girls. It was a devastating blow to the Greek system. It was also the year that the nation experienced a panic or a depression, and many fraternities and sororities were forced to close. Engineers' Day began in the 1920s as a St. Patrick's Day celebration. In the morning, St. Patrick rose from a coffin and led engineering students through the campus. The day was filled with contests from tobacco spitting to flag games and, of course, drinking beer. A tradition that has lasted much longer and that has evolved over a century was the Tree Day that started in May of 1902. Each class planted a tree on campus, culminating in the crowning of a Tree Day Queen. This became May Day, a sacred end of the school year for much of the 20th century, reaching its high point in the 1950s and 60s with torchlight parades, the crowning of a May Queen, floats, and sporting events. A well-behaved student tradition was government on campus. Student council formed in 1907, but most students who held jobs off campus could never be persuaded to take collegiate politics seriously. One exception was Ray Bliss, who in 1931 had become the consummate campus politico. It was where he first showed his genius at winning elections. He organized sororities and fraternities to win elections for class officers and student council. As he looked toward graduation in the spring of 1931, he wanted one last victory, the election of the May Queen. His candidate was Ellen Palmer, who was also his girlfriend. It was alleged that Bliss stuffed the ballot box. He denied any wrongdoing, but was suspended and he missed his graduation. Bliss took full responsibility for the election snafu and later found a position with the Summit County Republican Party. He would rise to be chairman of the national GOP. History would herald his leadership in electing President Richard Nixon. Bliss would also become a trustee of the University of Akron, receive an honorary degree, and would become the namesake for one of the country's leading programs of practical politics. In 1917, the faculty voted to require military training for all male students. A Student Army Training Corps was organized, which would become the ROTC in 1919. During the First World War, the campus looked like a military installation. A chapter of the Army's Pershing Rifles was formed. The first military ball was held in 1921. The first student center opened in 1939. Before then, the main campus eateries and hangouts were places like the Greeks, Ted's Confectionery, and later Schroeder's. Later generations of students would make the Chuckery in the Student Center a favorite hangout. Traditions related to athletics began at Buchtel College in 1873 with baseball. The first sports contest was organized by 9 men who could only afford one baseball. If the sphere was well struck, the ball had to be fished out of puddles or bushes if they wanted to continue playing. The baseball highlight of the early years came in 1891, when Buchtel College beat Yale 4-0 in 9 errorless innings. The college itself did not sponsor athletic teams at first, but the opening of Krause Gymnasium in 1888 contributed greatly to student enthusiasm for physical education. A gymnastics program was sponsored by George Krause and serial king Ferdinand Schumacher. There were fields on Carroll Street that included tennis courts, where women students would play in 1889. Basketball was introduced to Akron in 1902 by Charles Knight, the chemistry professor who would later serve as president of the college. It was first taken up by the women students. In 1908, the women played Yale on New Year's Day and won 36-30. A men's team formed later. They played Mount Union College, the best team in Ohio, and they lost 120-9. From 1914 to 1920, the university did have one of the best basketball teams in the state of Ohio. Akron joined the Ohio Athletic Conference in 1923. Akron basketball teams would win 8 conference titles, 5 tournament titles, 3 of them under the legendary coach Tony LaTerza. In 1954, the Zips moved to Memorial Hall. They would play in the NCAA Division II tournament 7 times, and they reached the championship game in 1964 and 1972. In 1984, Bob Huggins led the Zips to its first berth in NCAA Division I. In the 1997 season, Akron posted its first winning season in the Mid-America Conference under Coach Dan Hipsher. Keith Dambrot, who coached LeBron James, became head coach in 2004 and led a resurgence in Zips basketball with 10 postseason appearances. Football at Akron did not make its appearance until 1891, almost 20 years after the college opened. They had trouble getting 11 players to field a team, and they didn't have a real coach. That changed in 1892, when the boys persuaded the school to pay a director of athletics. They recruited a 23-year-old coach coming off a winning season at Oberlin College, John Heisman. In 1893, 13 men came out for football. Heisman was the player coach. This was the day of the rush. Players formed a V and pushed as hard as they could against the other team. Shedding blood was part of the game. Heisman developed a new way of hiking the ball. Instead of the center flipping it end over end to the quarterback, Heisman suggested that the center pitch the ball through his legs. By the end of the season at Akron, all college football teams were using Heisman's snap to start the play. Buchtel College played Ohio State University 3 successive years and lost 3 successive times. But in the fall of 1894, this was Heisman's second season, Buchtel tied Ohio State in regular play. Heisman was also the quarterback, and after taking a 10-minute rest, they went into sudden death, and Buchtel College beat Ohio State 12-6. Despite his winning record, the faculty of Buchtel College was unimpressed. Professors wrote a letter to Heisman saying that the main object of sports should not be to win, but to minister to physical development. Heisman left Akron and would eventually land at New York City's Downtown Athletic Club, which created an award to the nation's top college player, the Heisman Trophy, presented to this day. The Great Depression caused a decline in sports, with many men dropping out of school. By the time of the Second World War, it was hard to find enough men to field a team, even though football had moved to the new Rubber Bowl in 1940. Then in 1948, with the boom in post-war attendance at the University of Akron, the school got a colorful, enthusiastic athletic director, Kenneth "Red" Cochran.
And I was down one day taking some steam in the steam room at the old YMCA, and I couldn't see who was sitting across from me because of the steam, but I heard this voice, and it said, "Fred, why don't you sponsor the Akron U football game?" I knew who that was talking because that was Red Cochran. And I said, Akron U only brings in 2,000 to 3,000 people. We can't afford to sponsor the University of Akron.
Red Cochran coached football from 1961 to 1971 and posted a record of 32-15-1. He persuaded Fred Albrecht to sell tickets to the new Acme Zip game for $1.
I remember being up on the parapet at the Rubber Bowl with Ben Maidenberg, Norm Auburn, who was key to this thing, and myself, and we watched those cars rolling in. 23,000 people, the largest crowd they'd ever had. And old Red Cochran, you could see him down there clapping his hands in the middle of the stadium. It was a wonderful, thrilling sight.
The football program at Akron would be on again, off again for 4 decades. Gordon Larson posted 90 victories over a 20-year career as head coach, highlighted by a trip to the Grantland Rice Bowl in Tennessee in 1968. In 1976, Jim Dennison became the winningest coach in UA history and Kodak's National Coach of the Year. Jerry Faust was head coach for 9 seasons, followed by Lee Owens, J.D. Brookhart, Terry Bowden, and Tom Arth. Since 1946, Akron's principal football rival has been Kent State University. Each year, the victor gets to display the Wagon Wheel Trophy. The legend behind it is that in 1870, John R. Buchtel set out for Kent to find a new site for his college, but his wagon got bogged down in the mud. His horse broke away and left the carriage and the wheel entrenched in the muck. It was discovered in 1902 during road construction in Kent. Football moved into the new Infocision Stadium in 2009. The Akron Zips men's soccer team was organized in 1954 by Stu Perry, who led the team to 6 NCAA playoff appearances. Akron still is regularly ranked in the top 10 of collegiate men's soccer. Caleb Porter led the team to its first national championship in 2010 when they were supported by an enthusiastic mob of students, the AK Rowdies. University of Akron athletic teams have been known as the Zips since a campus-wide contest in 1927 when student Margaret Hamlin suggested the name the Zippers. That was the name of a popular rubber overshoe sold by B.F. Goodrich. In 1950, Red Cochran shortened the nickname to the Zips. The evolution of Zippy began when the Student Council decided the university needed a mascot. Zippy the Kangaroo, with her zippered pouch, was officially declared University of Akron's mascot on May 1st, 1953. In 2007, Zippy won national fame after an 11-week contest by being the Capital One Mascot of the Year. Enthusiasm for Akron traditions continues to this day, 150 years of seeing the energy of young men and women on display on the University of Akron campus.